I've entitled these remarks, No Separation Based on Form. No Separation Based on Form, with the subtitle, Thoughts from a Documentarian on Animal Cognition. And to illustrate, I thought we'd start with a clip. If you felt compassion watching this, that's a compassion that crosses species line. And what you witnessed there was what I would call an expression of preference. Before we discuss this emotion of compassion, let's do a little thought experiment. I'm a documentary filmmaker. When making a nonfiction film, I tend to use two methods of approach. One is story, and one is statistic. Here's one for you. 8 billion humans currently consume 80 billion animals every year. It's about a 10-to-1 ratio. It does not include seafood, by the way. That's a fact, which begs the question. How is it we can feed 80 billion animals, some quite large, namely pigs and cows, but we can't feed 1 billion humans, most of them children? Something is very wrong with that math. Animals, by the way, are poor caloric converters. In other words, it takes, for cows, for instance, 16 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of feedlot beef. If you took $16,000 to the bank and they gave you back only $1,000, you might be a little upset. You might even want some sort of restitution, grant, or subsidy to offset your loss. According to the World Health Organization, 1 billion people go to bed hungry every night, 500 million at the door of starvation. 80 billion animals, on the other hand, are not starving. In fact, the meat industry hopes to double that number by 2050. That's because they want you to buy more of their product, they want you to eat more meat. Now, how on earth are we going to feed 160 billion animals when we can't feed 1 billion people? I'll tell you how, and maybe some of you can guess already. By clearing forests. We cut down or burn down forests to create grazing land for these billions of animals, or grow food to feed these billions of animals before then killing all these animals, okay? Two machines at work here. One is the burning machine. One is the killing machine. The problem is we've already cleared 50% of forests. 50% of the Earth's forests are already gone. Talk about deforestation on a global scale. This is not a sustainable way of eating. These are the facts. We take 9 billion tons of food from the planet every year. We only eat 1.5 billion tons, but we're unable to feed everybody. Why are we doing this? Because we feed 7.3 billion tons back to animals, the poor caloric converters, and they only give us less than 1 billion tons. If you ask any engineer, can you solve this problem? Of course. Don't eat this way. The system can't handle it. It all starts and stops at the tongue, at the taste buds. It's a unique movement, if you want to call it that. You could not end the Holocaust by changing diets. Gandhi could not defeat the British Empire with a menu. So there's never been a movement like this before, because stopping what you eat takes a second. You don't need laws or changes in government. Not a single new law is needed. No armies to fight. Don't need money or power to change the world overnight. Just change the menu, and we're done. World hunger, solved. Environmental destruction. Factory farming is the #1 user and #1 polluter of fresh water. That's a fact. Human health. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death. Doesn't come from eating plants. That's a fact. Animal cruelty, as you saw a tiny, tiny snippet of an example. Billions of animals bred, fed, slaughtered every year. Done. Gone. Problem solved. You have the power in your hands. All starts and stops at the lips. For those of us concerned with climate change, think of cows like cars. As James Cameron put it, there are way more cows than cars on this planet. The burning machine is fossil fuels. The killing machine is factory farming. Interlinked. Interlinked. These are all facts. Now I'm going to pivot and present my second type of information in our little thought experiment. Story. One time at a dairy farm, they let the calf be with the mother for a day, get the colostrum, help build them up before they separate. And they use a barrier to divide the mother from her calf. And this mother fought so hard to get to her baby, she broke her own neck. Talk about an expression of preference. But once her calf was gone, the mother showed clear signs of depression. Anyone with cerebral function standing there witnessing that could tell that is an animal grieving. Her calf would never be seen again, not in this lifetime. Somehow she knew it. Why? Because this had happened to her before. This wasn't her first baby, it was probably her 9th. I've seen cows who may live 20 years naturally. I've seen cows literally fall over from exhaustion in their stall at the age of 4. That's the dairy industry. We're the only species on Earth who drinks milk after infancy. And what's stranger still, we don't drink our own milk, but the milk of another species. Why cows? Why don't we put kangaroo milk in our coffee? Camel milk in our cereal? That's a tribute to the effectiveness of the marketing of the dairy industry. So there stands this poor mother with her broken neck, her 9th baby taken from her, grieving in a deeply misunderstood way. And what's stranger still, speaking of animal cognition, and I kid you not, was the other mothers who came around to bolster her up. Sobering story, isn't it? But like the facts, this is equally true. Now, which piece of information struck you deeper? The statistics or the story? How little we understand animal cognition. As intelligent as we are, most of us don't think animals are sentient, that they feel, but they do feel. Anyone with companion animals at home who has accidentally stepped on a paw or a tail can tell you that they feel. Yet many people, for some reason, believe animals are soulless automatons. They're not. They want to live in peace without fear and protect their young. The first law of biology is self-preservation. This can be seen across the entire animal kingdom. Look how creatures cling to life, turning away in a shoot. How dear the existence is. Nothing is more precious to the end of your life than time. So the first law of biology is self-preservation. Life clings to life. What then is this emotion we call compassion? If we are nothing more than biological organisms, when a mother runs into a street to save her child from an oncoming car, willfully putting herself in harm's way, she is violating the first law of biology. When a soldier on a battlefield goes in to save a fellow soldier, a comrade in arms, from certain death, he is violating the laws of the universe. Why? Because the first law of the Spirit is compassion. We may not be able to prove we have a soul, but anytime you witness a biological organism expressing compassion first to their own detriment, I would argue that is scientific evidence that we are spiritual beings on a deeper level, deeper than bones, deeper than DNA. And when we wince at the suffering of animals, that feeling speaks well of us. It shows that we are not altogether barbaric. I can't tell you how many times people have come up to me and said, Shaun, I can't watch your film, Earthlings, which has its 20-year anniversary this year. They tell me it's too difficult to see. They're not wrong. It is difficult to watch. Please don't shoot the messenger. And perhaps this is the moment to say that we must not refuse with our eyes what they must endure with their bodies, especially since we contribute to 95% of it. I say 95% because the planet is 5 or 6% vegan. That's about it. Witnessing such scenes like that opening shot alters the heart. It touches the strings of pity, the well springs of mercy. The emotion of compassion is the first law of the Spirit. Until the ego wedges its way in, there are in-groups and out-groups. Compassion becomes selective. One may have compassion for their family, their friends, their tribe, their own faith. Where does this separation creep in? I call this separation based on form. But life is multitudinous in its expression. Life expresses itself as humans, as animals, as birds, as fish, as bugs, as tigers, as lions, as mold, as crows, worms, stingrays, snails, and on and on and on. Yet humans tend to cultivate love and compassion for some expressions of life, and in the same breath, an attitude of aggression toward other expressions of life. This is the definition of separation based on form, which is taught. We speak euphemistically of unconditional love, but there are conditions, and we become so blinded by the personal that we no longer see the universal. Racism. Separation based on form with a misperception over skin color and culture. Sexism. Separation based on form with a misperception over gender and anatomy. Speciesism. Separation based on form with a misperception over non-human life forms. But life is multitudinous in its expression. What Hitler failed to understand when he tried to eradicate Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, etc., was the world he lived in. He may as well try to kill off a certain type of bird or flower. You can cut down all the flowers, but you can never stop the spring, a poet once wrote. Life is multitudinous in its expression. This poses a challenge to a great many people with their in-groups and out-groups, including religion. The book of Genesis opens with a story of a garden in Eden. No separation based on form whatsoever. No separation between God and man. They walked side by side in the garden like friends in the cool of the day. No separation between man and woman. Both were naked, had no idea they were naked. No separation between man and animals. No living by killing. The lion laid down with the lamb without any ire. No separation between man and nature. Truly a garden of unity. Not the same, but equal. Many students of the Bible long to return to such a paradise. How can we do this with a mindset of separation based on form? In this sense, unconditional love becomes a real barrier. a true threshold, certainly for a great many theologians who claim to love a creator, just not all creations. Victor Hugo wrote in Les Miserables, an astounding novel if you haven't read it. Every man, even the best, has some unconsidered severity which he holds in reserve for the animals. Unconsidered severity. For those of us interested in higher consciousness, it's worth looking into any internal separations based on form. Life clings to life. How dear the existence is. Here's my last story, which is also factual. Take dogs, for instance, man's best friend, literally the embodiment of unconditional love. Do you know what species of dog is used most in animal research facilities? Beagles, that is correct. Why? Because vivisectors, those are researchers who use animal models to test for various human ills and ailments, have found beagles to be the most trusting and forgiving of breeds. In other words, you can herd a beagle repeatedly, and they're still less likely to bite. Think of the mentality of the vivisectors to exploit that kindness. A great separation sickness has taken hold of us between man and man, between man and woman, man and animals, man and nature, love for some, aggression for others, separation based on form, the burning machine and the killing machine. We are a long way from Eden. These are some things I've observed repeatedly over the past 25 years as a documentary filmmaker. There were times I sat at the editing table and wept over the footage I saw. There were also times when I had to take footage out of a film I was editing. Taking truth out of a nonfiction film is a moral crossroad for any documentarian. But Joseph Campbell said, "For one to know how far the truth goes, one only has to realize how far it goes in shattering." We should all be grateful for our illusions to be shattered. Please don't shoot the messenger. It's a movement that starts and stops right here. It takes a split second. And if you're ready, begin humbly, as Krishna said, by not hurting anybody, either by action or by word. Thank you.